So today we're going to talk about organizing your speech. And this is going to be really important to you because you've got 3 speeches you need to do for me with a specific outline, and I'm going to go over that today. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, and we're going to move along pretty quickly. So if you have questions later on, you want to ask something, you need some more information, be sure and yell at me. All right, let's talk about the steps. This is a process lecture. This is just the way you go about it. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about is to create your thesis. And you have to have that before you can write the outline, because the purpose of the speech is to prove that thesis. And so I came up with sort of a silly example. Blue is the best color. And so that's my thesis. I'm going to prove to you that blue is the best color, right, in my speech. And so I want to use that as kind of an example to show you how to figure that out, how to develop that. Create the main points. Well, I came up with 2 main points. Number 1, that it's the most popular color. Everybody likes blue, so it must be the best. And then, of course, that it's the most soothing. It relaxes you. So this is the first 2 points that I just touched on are the creative part of the speech. This is where you come up with your ideas, you come up with your labels. You know, we talked about that in the other lecture on topic selection and all that, to try to come up with a catchphrase that you can use in the speech. And this is where you would do that, okay? So understanding that, and understanding that you've done the research, right, based on this, that's where we would be in the speech-making process. Now you're going to do the outline. Okay, first thing you need to know is this is not an event where you read to me. A speech is not a reading. So you need to create an outline that allows you to have some structure, but allows you to communicate, just like I am right here, directly with the audience. That's probably the most important thing, in the sense of a lot of times students will do the outline and they will literally stand up and read it to me. And that's really, really dull and boring. Please don't do that, because that's just not good speaking. So we want to put you in a situation where you have good information in front of you that you can look at. You don't have to memorize the speech, but you can refer to it and you can just talk to the audience, just like I'm doing with you right now. And so keep that in mind as we kind of walk through this. Okay, so let's get into it. Develop the points. Now, when I say that, I'm going to step back over this way a little bit. When I say develop the points, here's what I mean. That means to give them some depth and some width, in the sense of I want you to be able to understand in more detail what those main points are. So in our example, your first main point is the most popular. Okay, so there are 5 steps in developing each point. Now I'm going to walk you through each one of those steps. Now what you need to understand before I step too far into there is you've already done your research. Okay, you've already found your evidence. And so I'm going to just put that into the process as we go through it. So there are 5 steps, and this is on the outline that you have on Blackboard that has been sent to you. You have, first of all, to state the main point. Well, we've already done that. Blue is the most popular. So that'd be really easy to do. You'd put, first point, and then you put blue is the most popular. Boom, you got it. Then you're going to present your evidence. Now this is where you're going to identify your sources. You're going to say, here's where I got this quote, here's where I got this evidence. Okay, third step is you're going to then explain, just like I'm doing right now, what that means, why that's important, how it proves your case, whatever it is you're trying to do. So that would be, that part of it. The fourth step, would be to summarize the main point you've just explained. Now, you might think, well, that's crazy. Why would you do that? Well, because in order to get the audience to remember your main point, you have to repeat it, because people listen so poorly. And we've talked about that earlier in the course. Okay, so that's step 4. So you simply summarize, you repeat it, hopefully in different language. Then step 5 is you transition to the next point, whatever the next point is. And so in this case, it would be, it's the most soothing. And then I would do exactly the same thing. I'd state the point, bring my evidence, explain it, summary, transition. Just nail that pattern into your brain, burn it in. because that's the pattern that you want to follow. Because what that will do is that will help you, develop the point so that when the audience hears it, they'll go, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. You got to sort of flesh it out. But remember, you're not reading. You're just going to be talking to me as you would talk to a friend. Okay. So once you've done this, now this, I know this sounds counterintuitive. I know it sounds backwards, but it's not. You write your main points first, then you write your introduction. You're probably thinking, well, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you write the intro first? Well, because you have to know what you're introducing. Because if you write the intro first, then the body, well, then maybe you change something in the body, and then that makes your intro a waste of time. You have to go back and redo it, so you don't want to do that. So get the main points done first, know what you're introducing, then you go to the introduction. Now, the introduction is probably the most important part of the speech, because that's where you hook the audience into listening. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have there is what we call an attention step. And it's an example, an illustration. The book talks about this at some length, and you should read that, about how to do that. Tell a story, give an example, give a statistic, something that's powerful that jumps out at the audience. So that's the first thing. Then you're going to state your thesis. That's this right here. Blue is the best color, because that's what you're trying to prove. Okay? Then you're going to say, okay, what next? Well, now I'm going to preview. Well, then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to talk about two things, that it's the most popular and it's the most soothing. Now, you do that to help the audience remember. See, in speaking, there's a lot of repetition because people don't listen well, and the trick here is to use different language so it doesn't get boring. All right, so we've got our introduction, then we do the conclusion. And in the conclusion, what you're doing is you're basically wrapping the speech up, and you're saying, okay, here's what we said. So in this part, you're going to say, here were the main points, right here. Then here was the thesis, right? So that's the idea there. Then the third part of it is what's called the action step, and that's where you ask the audience to believe, understand, relate to something that you said. You give them something to do, right? So when you guys do your speeches, I want you to follow these patterns in order to create your speech. That's an action step. Okay, then the tagline is always connected back to the attention step, because that's your frame. Because you start out maybe with an example, maybe you give just half of it. Maybe I tell a story to open the speech, maybe part of the story, and then I tell the rest of the story at the end of the speech in order to close it. Or maybe I ask a question, and then at the end of the speech, I answer the question. So they have to be connected, because that gives the speech a nice, clear closing point. It's what we call coherence, where it goes click, you're done. And so that's the process. And so when you're writing your outline, you're going to put down these key bits of information on the form that I sent you, and you're going to then practice that, standing up and speaking just like I am right now, and presenting that to an audience where you can be conversational in your approach with them. And that's what we're going to talk about a little later in the course, about how you do that. But if you don't have your outline down, that's going to be very difficult to do. So organization is a critical part of putting the message together so the audience can understand. Thank you guys so much.